Hello everyone, this is Hakaym and welcome back to some more World of Warships. And as many of you all know, the update to World of Warships came out 7.5, and that came out with the split branch, sorta, of the USN Cruiser line. Now unfortunately it was primarily focused on the heavy cruisers, with the exception of the Cleveland being upgraded to the Tier 8 rank and being put in the light cruiser part of the branch. So I decided that it would be a good idea to kind of talk about this major difference, as she is essentially the one cruiser that many people were very excited to see being essentially updated and buffed from her original Tier 6 version. And Cleveland has always had a history. I remember Cleveland always being very powerful, especially in the beta and early versions of the game, and then being severely nerfed and power creeped by a lot of the Tier 6 cruisers, but still being a fairly powerful cruiser at Tier 6. But now she is at Tier 8, and that means she now faces a variety of different threats and takes a lot of good gameplay, a lot of time to actually understand what you need to be doing with this new Tier 8 cruisers. Now, as you will see here in just a moment, what not to do with the Cleveland. Now, the Cleveland is a light cruiser, which means her armor is very thin, and she does have to rely on cover, which means she is very situational, and that is not always very beneficial. Now, as you can see, I'm taking into position of cover, and this map is actually a fairly decent map for the Cleveland, for the fact that there are islands where she can shoot over, and the Cleveland has these very high arcing shells that does allow the ship to shoot over the island and get shots without being seen. Now, unfortunately for this Cleveland, you can see how quickly she can go down. Once again, she is a light cruiser. She has fairly thin armor, and, well, as you can see, this Cleveland is now dead within mere moments of the game. So you do have to be extremely careful with the ship, but if left untouched, she can deal a significant amount of damage. So, really comes down to positioning. That's really going to be the major factor for the Cleveland, is getting into a good position and being able to deal damage without taking damage. Now, a lot of issue is going to be the fact that not all maps are best suited for this type of tactic. So, sometimes you'll have great games, sometimes you will not. So do keep that in mind whenever playing Cleveland, and don't decide to just kind of rush out there. So, talk pretty much about the kind of gameplay that you should be dealing with the Cleveland. And as you can see, her guns are fairly quick on the reload. They have a very lofty trajectory on the shells. That means you can able to shoot over islands, but at longer ranges is going to be a lot more difficult to hit faster moving targets. However, battleships are, they are food fish for the Cleveland. As you will see how quickly this new North Carolina will go down to the focus fire of all the USN Cruisers, and this is kind of terrifying for any battleship. Getting into a very terrible position will mean your demise through the burning and the HE penetration that the Cleveland can offer. Now, I would highly recommend getting IFHE for this light cruiser. Without the IFHE, you are going to have quite a bit of difficult time to actually penetrate the slightly thicker armor of a lot of these battleships compared to a lot of the Tier 6 battleships. Now, obviously this is in North Carolina, but the Cleveland will be facing Tier 10 battleships. That includes the Yamato, Montana, Kurfürst, and the Republic. So they have thicker armor, and IFHE is going to be very beneficial for you in the effect of actually dealing more damage, even though it reduces your chance of fire somewhat. So, guns reload fast. Turret traverse is fairly decent, a lot quicker than the original tier 6. So you're able to get your guns turned relatively quickly. The shell velocity is a little bit, it's actually very similar to the original tier 6. However, you do have a 1 kilometer range increase compared to the tier 6. Now you can see how quickly you don't want to be seen. As you can see, we have 3 ships aiming at us, and it's actually a really good idea to get out of position. Now moving on to the consumables. As you can see, we are currently using our radar, hoping to spot someone. But the Cleveland does have 3 consumables. It has defensive fire, has radar, which lasts for about 30 seconds and has a range of 9 kilometers, and hydroacoustics, which I think is fairly powerful. But I think it is very beneficial for her because, unlike the British light cruisers, she does not have smoke, and having that additional hydroacoustics is very beneficial, especially when dealing with any ships in smoke. So even when your radar goes down, you have a way to actually spot a target in smoke. So very beneficial to have. And as you can see, the match is fairly close. We are finally 1 ship ahead, and now let's actually talk about another buff that the Cleveland got, and that is her speed. She is a little bit quicker than the original. She does have a slight turning circle radius increase, only by about 10 meters, and a slightly slower rudder shift time than the tier 6, but only by about 2 seconds, so only a slight nerf there, but still is very beneficial. But once again, gameplay is going to be primarily focused on island hopping, and you're going to have to rely on at least someone else spotting for you. Now, as you can see, the map is currently actually going to have a cyclone. It is, in fact, I believe just about to start, or has started at the moment. So not always the best thing for the Cleveland. Cleveland kind of relies on being a little bit longer range to an extent. As I have mentioned, her shell velocity is very high arcing, so hitting a faster moving target at range is definitely a little bit more difficult. But at the exact same time, you don't always want to be that close to an enemy target. I would say probably a good range is around 10 to 12 kilometers to actually reliably get your shells to land. But as you can see, the Cleveland is, well, it's a ship that goes pew-pew a lot and can focus down other cruisers with relative ease. And things are fairly close. We are actually 1 ship behind, and it looks like this Alabama is now going to be our focus. And any moment now, once again, the Cleveland is a really good fire starter, and a lot of people, well, as you probably will have realized, are going to be complaining about this because HE spamming has always been an issue, battleships and cruisers alike. So we'll see what will happen once the booster and the tier 9 comes out. But fortunately for us, our Hakaym is doing a fantastic job. Just took out the Lion, and the Alabama is running away. Unfortunately, we are now starting to get sandwiched between the southern and northern side. Unfortunately, the southern side is actually kind of falling. Now, we do know there's at least 3 cruisers and a battleship, I believe. I believe there is 2 Baltimores coming around the corner, and obviously the Baltimore is the heavy cruiser line tier 8. And is obviously going to have a better job as far as actually doing damage, because it does run 203 millimeters versus the 152 millimeters that the Cleveland does use. But with the radar, we can use it to our advantage to actually spot and deal damage. And once again, not being detected is extremely beneficial, but with the high arcing shells, you can just lob these shells over, and this is just what makes the Cleveland very potent and powerful. Alright, so the only thing I'm not able to show you is her AA firepower, and it is potent. It will be very terrifying for a lot of tier 8, tier 7 carriers that it does witness, but it is not invulnerable from being focused down by higher ranking, higher tier cruisers. But let's now switch over to the AP, and even though it's 152 millimeters, you still can Citadel a broadside Baltimore with relative ease, and this Baltimore is just going to go down. So any moment now, of course, doesn't go down to that last salvo, and unfortunately we're not going to be able to get that kill, but we're doing fairly well on damage. 112k is nothing to shake a stick at, but that is a Colorado, and those are fairly big guns. And once again, the Cleveland is a light cruiser, and definitely not something it really wants to face. So you kind of understand, and maybe understand how you should be playing the Cleveland, especially with how I'm playing her. I'm keeping the island between myself and those big guns as much as possible, because she just generally does not have a lot of health. She doesn't have a lot of armor, so trying to be careful of my positioning is something you definitely need to work on when playing at the Cleveland, or better yet, any of the USN Cruiser lines. And any moment now, this Colorado is probably going to go down. Our team is well ahead in points and in ships. All that's left is a Agile and a Colorado, and this Harikaze is going in for the kill, see if we can deal a little bit more damage. And here you can kind of understand 5 broken shells, so IFHE would prove to be a little bit more beneficial against a battleship of this size, even a tier 7. So we switch over to AP. Let's just see how it does, and does a little bit better, but Colorado does go down, and all that's left on the enemy team is the Agile. And I will have to say, I feel bad for any destroyer captains out there, because with this new split branch, there are more radars than anyone can really deal with, and I don't really know how I feel about this, but it is kind of the USN shtick, I guess you could say. Radar is probably what the USN Cruiser line is very well known for, so I'm kind of iffy. I feel bad for the destroyer captains, but at the exact same time, the USN kind of needed a helping hand, because it has been power creeped by the other new nation lines. But obviously we know where the enemy destroyer is. He's currently capping A, and let's see if we can actually take him out. Now, once again, radar is going to prove very beneficial, and with the fact that there is a cyclone abound, we know that as soon as we are detected, he is well within our radar, and there's very little he can do. Now, this radar does last about 30 seconds and does have a range of 9 kilometers, but once again, in a cyclone, and can only be detected out to a range of about 7 kilometers. So we're gonna see if we can spot him. More than likely he's going to head south, because he came in from the north, and in a moment now we should be able to take him out, as well as the additional USN Cruiser line. There is in fact a new medal, the spotting medal. As you can see, we just earned it right there. That is essentially to let you know you were the first one to spot him, and this Agile is going to go down relatively quickly. There we have just earned Confederate, popped Hydro, because more than likely this Agile will be dropping torpedoes, but Cleveland is the bane of destroyers everywhere, and that is going to be game, and not a bad battle. Not a bad battle at all. So our team earned a victory. We brought home 300,000, 236 silver, 6,070 XP, and we earned Confederate. We did 131,505 points of damage, 338 shell hits, 2 incapacitation, 1 kill, 13 fires. Yes, 13 fires. Once again, kind of insane with the HE spamming. 3 citadels, 1 assisted base capture, and 3 spotted. We were top of the team with a base XP of 1,945. We did 12,000 against the Agile, 42,000 against the North Carolina, 29,000 against the Baltimore, and 21,000 against the Alabama. HE shells did around 54,000, while our AP did around 25,000, while fires did a ridiculous 52,000 points of damage. So, yeah, kind of on the fence as far as just adding additional cruisers that just sling HE. I know HE is the bread and butter of mini cruisers and is the best way to take out the big, heavily armored battleships, but it's just kind of insane with the amount of firepower the Cleveland can dish out. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and jump into the port, and we are going to see the difference between the tier 6 Cleveland, how it originally was, and how it is now at tier 8. So I will see you guys there. Alright everyone, welcome back to the port, and let's actually take a look on paper how she is different compared to the original tier 6 Cleveland. So starting off, survivability, she is obviously a little bit more healthier. She has a little bit more hit points than the original tier 6, but not by much. She went from 35,200 points of health to 36,900, so only 1,700 point increase. The other real major benefit of the tier 8 is her armor. Her armor is actually a little bit thicker. At the very most, it's 165. However, she is a light cruiser, and if you know very well how British cruisers are, makes them very easy to get killed. She can't really take a hit, and that's probably the most common thing you'll find with the Cleveland, and probably all the way up to the Worcester, is the fact that they just cannot take a hit. Now, one benefit of this lightly armored cruiser is the fact that she can be overpenned, and for that you can get away with doing a little bit more broadside. However, your citadel, especially for plunging fire as well as getting shot from below the waterline, will be netted citadels, and you cannot take hits. Once again, she is a very lightly armored cruiser, which means your play with the Cleveland will have to rely on islands, and that then means that the line is very situational. It does not have the smoke that the British cruisers have, so you do have to rely on the support of your fellow destroyers and anyone spotting, as well as being able to find shelter behind an island and staying hidden while being able to lob your shells over said island. And that's another thing about the Cleveland, is her guns are a little bit different. They're the same caliber, you have 4 triple turrets, but they are a little bit different. They have a slightly decreased reload time, 6.5 compared to the original 8 seconds, better turret traverse at 18 seconds instead of 29 seconds. HE damage and AP damage are the same. However, there is a slight fire increase from 12% to 14%. And the other major benefit is the fact that she does have additional range. Went from 14.6 kilometers to 15.6 kilometers. And since she is a USN Cruiser, she does have very lofty shells, which does allow you to be able to shoot over islands, as you did see in the video. Does mean you can do that, and I would almost highly recommend to follow that practice. As far as the caliber of the shells, the 152 millimeters, it is highly recommended to get IFHE for this cruiser. Yes, it does decrease your fire chance a little bit, but with the flags, it can be negated somewhat to a reasonable level. And the reload speed on the Cleveland is very quick, so you can get away with it without too much issue, but with that IFHE you can actually deal more damage, because for the most part you're going to be dealing with tier 8 up to tier 10 battleships and cruisers, and their armor is obviously going to be a little bit thicker and is going to have your HE shells breaking on them. So IFHE is highly recommended for the Cleveland, and probably all the way up to the tier 10. Moving on to AA defense. She has been upgraded. She has definitely been buffed from the original Cleveland. Starting off, you have 23 dual 20mm of the Oerlikons. The original Cleveland had 13 single 20mm. Then you have the 6x2 40mm Bofors plus additional 4 quad 40mm Bofors, compared to just the original 6x2 40mm Bofors. And then obviously the secondary guns offer additional AA defense. So your AA bubble is vastly increased. Your damage output for your AA guns is very fantastic. So very terrifying for any carrier that wants to come close to you. And the benefit of obviously USN Cruisers is they do have defensive fire. Moving on to maneuverability, she once again got a slight buff. Her speed is increased from 32.5 knots to 34.1. She does have a slightly bigger turning circle radius at 660 meters versus the original 650 meters, in a slightly slower rudder shift time, 7.2 seconds versus the 5.8. But that increased speed does allow her to get around a little bit quicker. However, as you may know, once again, the USN light cruisers don't really have, I guess you could say, a particular trait that would really offer any beneficial practice, such as like a smoke screen or increased acceleration like the British cruisers have. So you do have to be extremely careful, and you do have to be very careful on your positioning. Moving on to concealment, there is obviously a buff for her, and that is due to the fact that she is a tier 8 and she can get the concealment module on this ship. So that does drop her detectability range from 11.4 kilometers down to 9.1 for sea, and 7.4 kilometers down to 6.4 by air. So she is definitely a little bit more stealthier, which is extremely beneficial for this light cruiser, because once again you can't really take a hit, and you have to get into a good position just to be able to assist your team with its HE slinging firepower. Now moving on to the modules. Once again, this is a little bit different. She does have very powerful consumables, and I almost want to say it's slightly overpowered, but obviously this has gone through super testers and has been tested out relatively thorough. Starting off, you have defensive AA, which is extremely potent, increases your AA damage by 300% and is active for 40 seconds. Then she does have surveillance radar. Now it is not the full 9.9 kilometers that the Des Moines has. It goes out to a range of 9 kilometers and is only active for 30 seconds. So slightly shorter duration time than say the normal Des Moines is capable with the shorter range, but very powerful to have that. And especially if you have been playing destroyers when these cruisers come out, well, you're gonna have a very difficult time until things kind of settle down. But moving on, you do also have hydroacoustic search, which is very, very powerful, because if your surveillance goes down when you're pushing into a smoke, you can pop your hydro and you're still good. Now this is obviously the normal cruiser hydro that you see on a lot of USN cruisers. Range of ships is 4.4 kilometers and torpedoes is 3.2, being active for 96 seconds, so very nice to have. Now moving on to the upgrades, once again she gets a slight benefit over the tier 6 with the fact that she does have the concealment system mod 1. So very beneficial for that. And as far as setup, I did go for AA guns mod 2, which is I would say extremely beneficial because she's really good at shooting down planes. Though I would almost argue aiming system mod 1's very beneficial, though your guns fire rapidly and the dispersion is not the worst thing in the world. So it can be switched out for that, but going for AA guns mod 1 is a very viable choice. Moving on to the captain. Now, unfortunately, with the update, I unfortunately lost my original Cleveland captain, and I've checked everywhere for him. I think it was originally a 12 or 14 point captain, so I don't have it anymore, so I had to start from scratch, which sucks. So unfortunately, this is not fully spec'd out how I would like it. Starting off, priority target, adrenaline rush is very beneficial. You could easily opt out for expert marksman. Your turret's traverse is very fast by itself. Then I would recommend demolition expert because you will be slinging a lot of HE. Concealment expert. Then going back, I would highly recommend IFHE for the Cleveland just to get that better damage penetration for your shells. Moving on, then superintendent, and then it really comes down to you. If you want to focus, and I would almost recommend it, focus on your AA, getting advanced firing training or even basic firing training. Advanced firing training is far superior as far as being able to help your friendlies with your defensive AA. So those are at least a few of those. You could easily go for other options. You could go for jack of all trade, but I would almost recommend just sticking with your AA and focusing on that. So with that, that is a quick look at the difference on paper between the tier 6 and the tier 8 Cleveland, and this is going to be it for this video. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you like what you saw, hit the like and subscribe button. You guys have a great and fantastic day. Zaijian.